What is up, my dudes? Welcome in, welcome back, episode 2. I hope you guys are ready because today we are gonna get some awesome stuff done. Well, okay, before we do that, actually, here, we need a little bit of a change up. I've been using the Lethio Shield, which is a place that we're building live on our Twitch stream. If you're not familiar, or if you haven't been there, definitely go check it out. I'll have the link in the description. It is an epic mountain kingdom. We showed clips of it in episode number 1. You can also see a little bit of it there. But as I like to do, we need the build appropriate shield of the area in which we are working. And this right here is kind of the West Wind banner, a little bit of a pixelated version, but you know, it does the trick, it does the thing. Now we're feeling all kinds of properly representative of the area we're working on. We also got this nice Halloween hat, even though it's a little removed from Halloween now. As of the day I'm recording this, the 2nd of November, it is, we're a little past, that's all right, it's all right. We could just be a little festive for a little bit longer. That's totally fine. Needed to get that switched over for sure. But today, my friends, what we have in the agenda is a little something different from what we did in episode 1. For those of you guys who weren't there or just need a little bit of a recap, we came out here and we had a little bit of progress all the way or already done in the builds down here on this first layer, and we kind of had a good idea as to what we were trying to get set up, and we just went ahead and expanded on that idea. I showed you guys how I build these shacks, these huts, and we built them onto the next level, the level above a little bit. We got a decent amount of progress, not nearly done. You can see there's some empty levels up there. It's very messy, you know, cobblestone, exposed pathways in the roof from the layer above and below, the ladders that I used to use to get up and down. You know, we got these pillars. There's still these weird openings that there's, you know, that's a long way to go. It's a long way to go. We're early on in the project, but hey, that's part of the beauty in it. You guys get to see it come to fruition from the start all the way to the end. And boy, oh boy, in terms of today's progress, today's episode, today's plans, I have been busy. What you guys are seeing right behind you is a little glimpse at what I've been doing today and a little glimpse at what's on the agenda for today's stream. Now, let me get you guys a little up to speed here. As of last episode, I explained that this is generally what I want a completed West Wind to look like. West Wind, of course, being the name of the kingdom that we are building. Now, this was an early concept build, and upon kind of looking at this and planning out how I really wanted to take the progress from here on out, I kind of came to the conclusion that we needed a little bit more detail. While yes, this does look very cool, I love the hidden lighting that we had originally. I love a lot of the aspects of these obsidian growths and glowstone kind of adding to the mystical feel that we kind of have forming within these caverns. That is a hole that I need to patch up. That was for a beacon in the past. But in general, I think it was good, but not perfect. And it could use a little bit of work. And so as of earlier, when I was really thinking about what this place needed, how it could improve, one of the ways that we can definitely make that happen is by adding some of the little things. And so if I just walk through here, maybe toggle the cinematic cam for a bit, maybe just kind of slowly make our way through, you guys can really start to see some of the big changes that I made. Obviously, you'll have to ignore the pieces of string. I need to make those transparent in the resource pack, but you know, we'll do that eventually. You can kind of see a lot of the changes that we've done, and a little bit goes a long way. It's not too much that we've done, but especially from this angle right here, you can really get an idea for some of the proper vibe that we're going for. Now, because we're in this big cavern that's very exposed, there's a lot of water nearby. It's a fairly humid area. You know, the climate above ground, it's in a forest. It's not in a necessarily cold or like super warm kind of dry area. You're going to have some vegetation growing in the caves. And so we've really emulated that with the moss blocks, the mossy cobble that we have kind of mixed in with the stone texture all the way up the walls and the ceilings on the kind of ground level where there's not a roadway. All kinds of that stuff happening. We have some glow berries hanging down, which also doubles as a nice way to light up the roofs, light up everything up top so that we don't have these weird dark areas above all of the roofs. And it just, I don't know, it looked a little weird before. So I'm really happy with that I'd kind of come up with to kind of fix that issue. We have some glow lichen mixed into the area, which I just thought mixed in really well with the whole cave vegetation vibe. And also it helps lights up some of these crevices, some of these little areas between the buildings. Now, obviously, as we get a little further and we build more of these buildings throughout, it's not always going to be building tiny little space, building, you know, kind of that repeating over and over, especially when we get over there, we have that big opening. It's going to be in a lot of those areas that we start to dig further in and we kind of hollow out a different cavern, maybe not as big as the main cavern that we have down there that we're all familiar with, but little caverns here and there, openings where we can add some more buildings within the walls, a little deeper into the kind of underground sections. We can have little streams of water feeding into this kind of main area here, all kinds of things like that. But right here we have a little bit of start as to our kind of detail phase, and this is something that I wanted to show off before we've built all of the shacks. I didn't want to just do nothing but shacks until we got them done. That'd be a little bit boring, so mix in a little bit of some spice here and there. We figured out what we want to do for the lighting on the side of the roads. Something simple, nothing too crazy. Couple of iron bars with a lantern on top. You know, it doesn't have to be extra fancy. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can definitely vibe as it is right there, nice and simple. Sometimes that is the way to go and what works the best. A couple of other things you guys will notice is that I have added some extra detail into the walls, into the foundation, into the general framework of each of these buildings, or the first two I should say. We have some stairs that kind of give these little cutouts, these little missing pieces of stone, gives it a little bit more shape. We do it in the base with andesite a little bit here and there as well. Obviously put a block under there so it looks like it's, you know, a part of the actual ground down there, and it just helps it get a little bit more unique from building to building. You know, this one is no longer super identical to this one, so on and so forth. It's going to help add character to each one of the buildings. It's going to help take a building style that is otherwise very repetitive and very copy paste and make it a little more unique building to building. It's going to help it quite a bit. We want to have a very copy paste feeling, but we also want it to look good, right? Because in with the lore and the themes within the story and everything, the buildings weren't originally meant to look the best. They were there for functionality, and very much, or rather the copy paste feature very much emulates that to a T. So it's a matter of balancing having that for the lore friendly purpose, but also giving it character, a little bit of spice, a little bit of pizzazz on each one of the buildings, if you will. You may have also noticed that we have done some interior work. So first of all, we have this glass right here, gray stained glass pane, which in the resource pack that I use, A Little Taste of Jerm, link in the description, by the way, for that one. We have this style right here, and I very much love this style of glass in terms of the textures on it. Obviously the light gray shade works pretty good as well. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with the resource pack, every color of glass has a different texture, and so throughout different areas in the world you'll see all kinds of crazy looking glass. I'm a big fan of it personally, gives us a lot more uses, but I thought this fit the best down here with the style we were going for. I considered iron bars, but at the end of the day, in terms of a story aspect, while a lot of it is stone based, a lot of kind of life down here in Westwind, not all of it is, because they have access to the woodlands above, the forests above now. They didn't always, but it is something that they've had for a bit of time now. So they do have implementations of wood, whereas they didn't previously. So, you know, you see it a little bit in the doors, you see a little bit in the glass. You know, they're able to trade with other places that can make glass. They have carpets, stuff like that, stuff that they didn't always have accessible. You know, you can picture in the early days of West when everything was stone based. Obviously, we still have some granite chairs. We still have the beds that are mostly made of stone, stuff like that. It's not a large overhaul of what's going on. It's still very true to its origins, but you get little hints of it, right? The barrels, the crafting tables, the carpets mixed in with things like the all stone furnaces, which you'd see anyway, but the tables are all made of stone and all of that. It's a good mix of the different kind of aspects to how they live their life. Very, very different from any other place in the world that might be above ground, not here, not in Westwind, not in a big cavern, right? So trying to emulate that as good as we can is really a goal here. And so what I've done is I have some candles around the houses. There's a little bit on that table, a little bit on the bedside table over there. Purple in that house over here, I started to incorporate a little bit of yellow candles as well, just to kind of fit the theme of course, the Westwind banner, the Westwind flag. You can see it on my shield right there. Purple and yellow is a common recurring theme, so just to kind of embrace that a little bit. Obviously, the interiors from building to building are a little bit different depending on the size, depending on the location, all that kind of stuff, what we can fit, how we can fit it, how we can make it work, all of those types of things. This right here, if you're a little confused, this is just a painting. It is a part of the resource pack that I have. Again, link in the description if you want to use it. I highly recommend it. It's a very good building resource pack, and I am a huge fan of it. I built most of this world using that resource pack, and it has a lot of cool little things, like a pots and pans little painting right there, which works in this context pretty well for our purposes. Now, in terms of what we're doing today and what the goal is, what the idea is, what we're aiming to do, this is very much the focus and kind of what I want to start to sprinkle in all the way along this first layer. We'll get started on it. Obviously, there's certain sections like right there that we're going to hold off from for the time being, because I do need to dig that area out quite a bit, get us a cavern, something that we can detail up in the future and add more things into. But I wanted to show you guys a little bit of how that was all working, what we had going on before we truly jump into it. And as we jump into it, of course, as we did in the last episode, I want to show you guys a little bit in terms of how we actually go about getting things done, how I actually do this process, how I go about it, all of that kind of stuff. We're not going to need that shulker, so I'm just going to put that over there for the time being. And we'll start with the interiors. Pretty simple stuff. We can head on into this house, and we have a very rough starting kind of concept right here. We just have this big massive chunk of stone in our way. So I'm going to do this is I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and I'm going to kind of flow the shape with what we have going on here in the bottom lip of the roof. You can see we have a couple blocks there. It kind of skips a block, continues on straight. We might have another skip and kind of round the shape out, somewhat similar to the front, get some kind of recurring shape, recurring theme going on, some kind of sense of predictability going on here, so it's not too off of the walls, too crazy. And once I do that, I will come right back to you guys. All right, so I've gotten everything cut out, and I've also placed bits of the roof in the kind of shape that I was going for. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to mirror this side, just something that feels like it would flow naturally with the general shape of the house, of what we got going here. The next step as to what I'm going to do is just get us a general kind of idea as to the vibe of the building. And the way I go about doing that is, first of all, let's get a floor in here. Let's make it feel like it's all one common place, like it's not all over the place, like it's not super scuffed and just very messy. And, you know, it's just, I don't know. That's one thing that always bugs me the most when I'm building. If the floor is super messy and it's just a crazy collection of different blocks and whatnot, it is just a recipe for disaster. I'm not here for it. It bugs me. It's all I can see. I can't focus on anything else, and we gotta fix that. Don't worry, I'm gonna pick up all that stuff in a little bit. I'm just struggling for room right now in the inventory, but trust me, I don't like letting things despawn either. What I want to do to at least get us started here is place our floor material here, which is, of course, these smooth stone blocks, which I think fits the aesthetic perfectly for down here in Westwind. Let me just place a couple temporary lanterns just so we can kind of visualize and see what we're working with here. The next step, of course, I'll do the wall. I'll just do a little bit of andesite, kind of mimic the pattern that we do in the other buildings, of course. A couple 2 high, maybe a couple 3 high, at least 1 high all the way around, mix in the stone brick. We're not going to have any cobblestone because there's no doors over there. There's no windows over there, of course. So that's just unique to those little features within the buildings. Clean all of this area up, and then we'll have our basic outline for the building. All right, now that we have the wall in place, we can really start to visualize the interior of this build. But before we start doing the actual interior and getting everything placed, I like to switch gears a little bit and focus on the exterior of the building just a little bit, get all these details figured out, and then top it all off with a proper interior. And so, first things first, let me actually seal up the building and get it a proper window situation happening. And now, when we close the door, we have a nice enclosed building. We actually feel like we're in a safe structure. It's no longer just wide open right here, just ready for anything to stroll on in. And we'll be coming back to the interior in just a little bit. Now I want to switch my focus to the exterior of the build. You'll notice that I have all kinds of things for detailing the exterior, from glow lichen to mossy cobble to the lanterns that go on the side of the road, all of that good stuff ready so that we can kind of get a little idea as to how this process goes. First and foremost, remove anything that isn't regular stone. This does add to the messy feel, which in some instances can be pretty good, but for our uses, we don't want it. I'm looking for stone and mossy cobblestone, and essentially just those two things. Now, actually, don't quite remember exactly how many of these I got rid of, so we're just going to hope that that was exactly the shape that we were going for, and we didn't mess anything up there. I do believe that this is mostly fine. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we don't have to be too picky about it. That should do. I'm going to get rid of some of these corners and just add a little bit of character with a slab here or there. Maybe I'll go right here and switch over to a mossy cobblestone slab. Just get us a little bit of variation right there, a little bit of added interest. A little bit goes a long way. It is, at the end of the day, the little details that make all of the difference. So we haven't gotten to this building yet. I'm not going to come over too far in terms of our detailing on the floor there. There's only a little bit that we have to do to get caught up with our area in which we are focusing. Couple of things right here, maybe a piece of stone, maybe a little piece of mossy cobblestones creeping on up over here. I'm gonna get rid of every block over here, and we're gonna do, ooh, actually, let me put a couple of these back. We're gonna do a mix of mossy cobblestone and moss carpets. In some of these areas that aren't really traveled on ever, you're gonna have a little bit of extra vegetation growing in, so the moss carpets do a very good job at emulating that, as opposed to something like right here. Occasionally you'll have people walking across it, you know, it gets traveled on enough, it gets enough attention that you're not gonna have these big growths of stuff happening on, you know, the areas right next to the side of the road. Sometimes you might have it creeping in a little bit right here. I mean, you just come out, you're going over here, or you come out here, you're kind of walking this way, but you're never really walking right over here. And so there's some instances where it makes sense to bring it out, but not always. Maybe right here would be another good example of where we could get away with a moss carpet, just to give you an example, but you kind of get the idea. What we're trying to emulate is the further back you go, the more vegetated it gets. And so this also brings us into the glow lichen and how we can make this work in certain areas of the builds as opposed to on the exteriors. You'll notice that they're there in between the buildings and up on the sides of the cave walls, but they're not here. They're not in the front of the buildings. They're not easily visible right on the roadside. Like I said, occasionally you'll have instances where there's maybe little to no attention, but for the most part, out here, it's pretty much nothing. It's pretty much barren. There's a lot less vegetation happening at the forefront of where all the activities happen, and the further away you get, the more that's going on. That's a common theme that I'm really trying to hammer home. I'm really trying to get across and really visualize here with what we're doing. We might have one right there, might have a little bit showing from the roadside, but not too much. I'll probably end up adding some more up there. But in terms of the ground level, it's pretty simple. All of that is pretty standard all the way across. Maybe mixing a little bit of some mossy cobble going up the wall back here. I'll need to get up on top of the buildings to do the walls up there and get a little more attention going that way. In terms of the road lighting, I don't really worry about it all too much. Just kind of visualize what seems like a good distance to go between adding these lampposts and just kind of roll with it. Don't need to be too picky, don't need to overthink it. I don't have like a set science to it, a set amount of blocks that we go for, nothing like that. It's a pretty simple vibe. And so from here, it's just a matter of getting up on top of the roofs, mixing in a varying amount of mossy cobble, regular stone, stone slabs, mossy cobble slabs, all that kind of stuff. The cobblestone is obviously where I left off last time. We don't really have the regular cobblestone anywhere, and so replacing all of that. In these big flat areas, it'll just be a matter of adding some character, and you guys will kind of see that, especially when we get through with doing a big chunk of our progress here in terms of how I manage these flat areas and how we can specifically go about them. I'm not going to show too much of that on camera here, as that's a very tedious process, something that takes us quite a while to do. But let me go ahead and freshen up this area right here, just to give you an idea on the before and after. And just like that, we have got ourselves a very good start to our progress here, at least in expanding our ceiling and wall operations. It's very simple. That didn't take me too long at all. It's just a matter of mixing in mossy cobble in the walls, getting a little bit of transition detail up in the corner crevices, and then mixing in the roof, getting a little bit of depth going with some slabs, some full blocks, maybe a little bit of some glowberry action to help light the place up. Again, I really want to make the string transparent. We got to have it there so it doesn't grow down any further. But you get the idea. You can really start to see what we're trying to do. Obviously, the corners will get a little more detail, a little more love as I get a little more detailed and a little more particular with the various areas. But just to give you guys a general idea, right? You saw the before, now you see the after. It makes a huge difference. And it's not even that much time that is required in terms of at least placing everything, swapping everything out, mixing everything in, all of those kinds of things. Obviously, the material gathering aspect does take a little bit of time, so that can obviously throw a wrench in the gears there a little bit. But once you have everything, it goes pretty smoothly. I definitely recommend getting very stacked on everything you need ahead of time. It definitely is a lifesaver. But in terms of the landscaping, the kind of detailing in that aspect, that's really the vibe that we're going for here. Now, next up and last before we get going on really getting fast and doing a lot of progress here is the interior. And so just as I did in these previous two buildings, it's very simple, it's very go with the flow, it's very much just figure out what goes where, what fits where. A bed's good right here, a kitchen's good right here, add some extra details, maybe a chest, a table with a lamp, maybe a table, chairs up here, some paintings up there, maybe a shelf. Pretty simple stuff, a carpet in the middle. I don't really like my carpets to touch anything else, so I kind of have them just scattered across random blocks in the center. No real science to it or anything like that. Maybe a couple lights to evenly light up the place from the ceiling with the chains. Pretty simple stuff, nothing too crazy. And with that, let me show you guys the before and after. There we have it. There is our third house, or third interior, I should say. The kitchen worked best over here. For the bedroom, I decided to only have one bed. Well, I say bedroom, but you know, they're all just one room. They're very open concept. That is a common theme over here. But just one bed. I don't know, putting two beds over here just would not work right, no matter how I may have attempted to go about it. So that was just what we decided to do there. I don't want to overdo it with the candles, so maybe just some on the kind of dining table right here, if you will, just the general table and the or I guess chairs and stone table that we have going on there. It does add a little bit of interest right here with how crowded the entry is, just because of the tables and chairs being right where they are. Obviously the carpet in the middle, a lot of storage over here. Some general stuff. Some of the barrels in this resource pack, they'll have little textures on top. This one's supposed to represent like cod, like is a barrel of fish or something. So you get a little bit of aesthetic added from that, a couple lights, the general stuff. You know, the interiors go by pretty quick, nothing too crazy. And that is one of the beauties to this area. As complex as everything is, there's a rainbow right there. As complex as everything usually is in terms of the scale and size and just how much it goes into digging everything out, building all of the areas, putting together all of the buildings, and fine-tuning the caverns and everything. When it comes to the nitty-gritty, to the details, it goes by pretty quick, and that's a nice refreshing thing to have going on, especially with all the time that goes into the other parts. So I'm definitely happy that that is the case, and it definitely lets me kind of fly through certain areas of the progress in this specific build as opposed to others. With all that being said, having shown you guys kind of how everything goes, I hope you guys have a good idea as to how maybe you can implement some of this into your world and some of your builds. As for us and our project, it's time to get some things done. We're gonna go ahead and speed things up a bit. My dudes, we are back after the quick building of the entirety of the ceiling here on the bottom floor, and a little bit then some with the buildings and the walls. Now, as we walk through here and you guys get a closer look at some of the details that were added as I went through here, I will mention that this did end up taking quite a lot longer than expected. It is a couple of days later from when we recorded the first part of this episode. But at the end of the day, regardless of how long it took, I do really enjoy how it's looking. Obviously, at the end of the day, no matter how long it takes, if it can look as good as this, then that is a-okay. We'll just have to adjust our plans. I didn't get to do any of the interiors yet on these buildings. I did detail up the sides of them. You guys probably saw from the time lapse, and I did a lot of work in the roofs, a lot of work between the buildings and some of these walls and some of these crevices along the roadway, some of the lighting, all of those little details all along this bottom section right here. And I haven't done anything above that yet. We haven't built any more buildings yet. Just wanted to get a really good idea as to how it's going to start to shape up as we go up to some of the other layers that we have going on as well. And if you're wondering what's going on here, I believe I mentioned it a little earlier. The plan is to take any of these areas where the pathway kind of comes in towards the wall and we don't have any buildings next to the wall. We're gonna dig out some caverns here. So similar to how we have the kind of concept build for the city of Westwind down here dug out in that cavern, something similar to that effect in any of these areas. There's one over there. There's one right here, for example. And that doesn't mean I'm gonna dig out this massive underground thing that takes up this entire space, but I'm leaving it blank because in the future, I'm not exactly sure how large we'll go or any of the intricate details. That is something to figure out in a future episode, of course. But at least for today's episode, with the progress that I did manage to get done with the hours that were put into it, I'm pretty happy with it. I love how it's looking. Let me know down in the comments how you guys are feeling about some of the details and some of the things that we are getting done here. I think in the next episode, we'll be definitely focusing on getting the interiors up to date, up to where we're at least. I think along with the interiors, oh, it is raining. Along with the interiors on the next episode, I think I might also focus on cleaning up this little wall down here. That kind of takes us between our bottom section and then up where the road kind of meets where the first level of buildings are, just so that your attention isn't directed away from the builds too much. Obviously, I'm not going to keep it just flat stone over there in the long term, but just something to clean it up. I'm not liking how messy it is, and we'll see from there. We might even get a little bit of progress done over on this side, or we might decide to do a little bit more house action. We'll see how we're feeling, how it's going. We'll see how the vibes are vibing, and I think that'll do it for us today, my friends. Thank you all for watching this episode of Building Blutora. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to let me know in the comments how you thought the roofs, the walls, the details in the buildings, and the just surrounding atmosphere in the, I guess, caverns, the cutouts, the whatever we want to call these areas, how they turned out. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any ideas for how we could maybe improve them? Anything we should add in the future, or whatever it may be? Anything at all, let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so that you know when we release more of these episodes. Don't want to miss out on it. But I think that'll do it for us. On that note, I'll see you guys next time with episode number 3. Have a good one. Keep on vibing. And until next time.